The beginning of the story. Zion and the Shadow. Once upon a time, there was a man named Zion who owned nothing in the world but his hammer, his fire, and a piece of bread that would suffice him until morning. One morning, he found a blind cat at the door of his kiln. It was thin as a thread, feeling for stones with its claws, as if it were searching for something it had lost long ago. Zion had nothing to give, but he broke half his loaf of bread and threw it in front of her without a second thought. She came the next day, and the day after that, and every day thereafter. He called her Shadow because she was always in the corner of the bellows, silent like a shadow, asking for nothing but what he gave her. Zion would divide his food between them every day. If work was plentiful, they would eat together. And if times were scarce, she would eat first, and he would eat what was left. And one of the neighbors would sometimes ask him, shaking their heads, "Why do you feed a blind cat that can neither hunt nor be of any use?" Zion would reply without thinking, "Because she's hungry." He had no better answer, nor did he need one. 3 years passed like this. Then Bahlul, a huge man with embroidered clothes and a voice that filled the street, came and stood before Zion's bellows and said, "I want 100 iron tools, hammers, sickles, and plows. I'll pay for them in 3 months." Bahlul smiled the smile of a wealthy merchant. 20 dinars for every 10 tools, Zion calculated in his head. What's a dinar? He bought iron on credit from a man named Dirar, 20 times what he earned in a month, and promised him, with payment after 3 months. Zion began working like never before, from dawn until after the 3-month trickery of the merchant Bahlul. His hands cracked from the heat in the hammer, but he didn't stop. Often he would forget to eat, and his entire loaf would go to a shadow. And a shadow would sit in its corner, listening to the sound of the iron every day, as if guarding it from afar. After 3 months, the 100 tools were placed on a cart, and Zion carried them to Bahlul. The merchant looked at the tools, touching them one by one with slow fingers, then said, "This work is shoddy." Zion froze. "What? The plows are uneven, the hammers are heavy. I won't pay anything. I worked for 3 whole months, and I asked for a certain quality. This isn't what I asked for." Zion fell silent, looking at the tools he had made with his own hands and blood. Then he looked at Bahlul and understood. There was nothing wrong with the tools, but he understood this too late. The next day, Zion went to the judge. He thought the truth was clear, but when he entered, he found Bahlul sitting calmly, as if he were in his own home. The judge listened to Bahlul first, then to Zion, and then said in a concluding tone, "There is no proof that the work was done according to the specifications. My witnesses are in the market. The market witnesses don't know what the 2 parties agreed upon." Zion went out alone. The door closed behind him, and the street was crowded, but he didn't hear anything. He walked until he reached the bellows and sat on the ground. Then hope came from where he least expected it. A kind-faced man named Munir stood in front of the bellows in the evening and said, "I heard your story, Zion, and I want to help you." Zion raised his head. Munir said, "I know, Dirar. I can arrange for the debt to be postponed. All I ask is that..." Working in my shop for a year seemed reasonable. Munir seemed like a good man, and Zion desperately needed any hope. But before he could pick up his pen, he heard a familiar voice from the street, Bahlul's voice. Zion slipped away. "Zion." To the edge of the door, Bahlul looked. He was standing nearby, talking to another man, and in his conversation, there was one word that Zion clearly heard: Munir's name. Zion closed his fingers without picking up the pen. He looked at Munir and said coldly, "I won't sign, but let's sign." Munir left, his face saying more than his tongue could express, and Zion was left alone in his kiln, even more so than before. Bankruptcy and trial loomed. The next day, Darar, a tall man with calm eyes, came. He stood before Zion and said, "The payment was due yesterday. Give me a week." "A week won't change anything," said Darar as he left. "If you don't pay before Friday, I'll take the kiln." Zion thought of everyone he knew. His neighbor, the carpenter, also owed Darar money, as did his friend, the blacksmith in the market. He said shyly, "I can't argue with Darar. You understand the imam." He gave him 3 dirhams and said, "This is all I have, 3 dirhams, and the debt is 100. That night, Zion didn't light the kiln. He sat in the darkness, staying by its side. He had no bread, so he gave it the last crumb in his pocket, looking at it. "The earth," he said to himself. "Tomorrow will be the last day." Friday came. Darar came with 2 men who placed the confiscation seal on the bellows. They carried the tools one by one. Zion stood looking, didn't move, didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He came out of the bellows for the last time and sat in front of the door on the stones. The sun was setting, and the street was empty. Then he heard a sound behind him. It was a shadow. She came out of the bellows and sat beside him. She didn't make a sound, she just sat there. Zion said in a hoarse voice, "Ah, that's it, Shadow. There's nothing there." An hour later he got up to walk, but the shadow didn't follow him. She stood and looked towards the bellows door with her blind eyes, then scratched the door with her claws once, then twice. "There's nothing there, Shadow," she said 3 times, standing there unmoving. Something in her patience made him stop. In 3 years, she never asked anything of him, never shouted, never bothered him. Just, she was there. And now, for the first time, she was asking for something. He pushed open the door, and the bellows entered in the darkness. She walked slowly ahead of him, feeling the ground with her claws, as she always did. But tonight, she walked in one clear direction, without hesitation. She stopped at the corner of the old bellows, by a large stone on which Zion placed his foot every day without looking. The night that changed everything for him. One day, the earth around him was scratched. Zion sat before it and took the only old hammer that Scar had left by mistake. He struck the ground around the stone. The clay cracked. He pushed the stone aside and dug with his hands. After a while, his fingers touched something solid beneath the clay, a sealed earthenware jar in the old clay. He lifted it slowly, as if afraid it would break. He broke the clay and opened the lid. Gold dinars and much silver, more than he needed to pay off every debt, buy new iron, and start anew. Zion remained seated, motionless, his heart pounding, his hands still. He looked at her shadow as she sat before him, her blind eyes facing him directly. She wasn't asking for anything. She was simply there, as she always had been. He wondered to himself how much, from time, she knew how many times she had passed over this stone, listening to the sound of the jar beneath it. When she decided the time was right, he found no answer, and didn't search for it for long. In the morning, he went and paid off Dirar's debt to the last dirham. Dirar looked at him for a long time and asked, "Where did you get it?" Zion replied, "From my friend." Then he went to the judge with enough dinars to appeal the case against Balul. This time, he brought 4 witnesses from the market, merchants who hadn't dared before because Balul was powerful. They came now because Zion walked with a different gait. Balul entered the court confidently and left terrified. He was forced to return the full price of the tools and pay a fine on top of that. He left with a face unlike the one he had when he entered. Zion got his bellows back. On the first day of work after that, Zion lit the fire early. The bellows were warm again, the iron was red hot, the hammer was clanging. The shadow came and entered through the door, as if it had never been gone. It walked to its usual corner and sat down. Xian took out his loaf of bread and broke it in half. He placed one half in front of the shadow, as he had done for 3 years. Then he sat before her and gazed at her for a long time. He wanted to say something worthwhile, but what words could possibly suffice? What could you say to someone who saved you without even knowing they were saving you? In the end, he said in a low voice, "You fed me." The end and the moral. She didn't answer, of course. She simply extended her small paw and touched the piece of bread, then ate. And that was more beautiful than any words. He who feeds the needy on a day of hardship will not go hungry on a day of need. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more beautiful stories.